Chris, thanks for talking to us. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Like I was saying, you've got an impressive array of work that you've built up over the years. What was it that drew you specifically to science fiction and fantasy?
I always had a kind of passing interest in things to do with space, astronomy, and as a kid I used to look at the stars and things like that. Then I saw 2001 and another film that was made on the back of that called Silent Running, which is a Doug Trumbull film, and
it's a bit of a cult favourite, that one.
Yeah, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. And then an art director that I was working with particularly closely, a chap called Peter Bennett at Methuen. They had a lot of Philip K. Dick stuff at the time, and they published Alfred Bester and quite a lot of the big names at that time. I'm going back to the early 70s, really, 73, 74.
Which is quite a prime time for science fiction.
Well, you had people like Angus Mackay and Chris Foss and Tony Roberts, and there's a whole stable of artists coming out of young artists, of which Jim Burns was one. And they pretty much cornered the market, on doing space pictures, stuff to do with science fiction. And Peter at Methuen said to me one day, I'd like to try you on doing some science fiction, And I'd already done probably 20 or 30 commissions at that time with my partner Mick, who was a designer, and he and I worked together on projects, and we'd been doing these mass market paperback covers and things. And then one day, as I said, Peter came up to me and he said, I'd like to try doing some science fiction. I said, oh really? Well, I don't really do science fiction, I haven't really gone into that. He said, well, no, I think you could make a good, fair crack at it, So I did a couple of covers, and they were dreadful. They really were terrible. One of which was a book called Extro by Alfred Bester. And many, many years later, I was at a convention, and a fellow came up to me with a whole stack of books to sign, and one of them was this book, by Alfred Bester. And I thought, oh God, where's he dug this thing from? Anyway, I signed all these books, and then as I got to this one, I opened it up, and Alfred Bester had already signed it as a paperback, and he'd written, if there was ever a book I didn't want to sign, it was this one, So I just wrote ditto and signed my name. Then what happened was they had a change of policy within the publishing house, and they proofed up covers which were what they call wraparounds. So the design was not only on the front, but it went onto the spine and onto the back as well. And this made it easier for the sales reps to go to the book buyers in the shops and say, well, this is coming out, how about buying a load of these? And that seemed to fit very well with my approach. Instead of working on an image about so big, you're working on something this big, And the image the interesting part of it had to be on the right-hand side, in the same way that, like these, the important bit of the cover is on the right.
Points, yes.
That's right. But the rest of it it adds to it, if you like.
What you're talking about with the covers for your front and back, with that change and that shift, and it gave you a canvas to work from, because you did a cover for 4 novellas that were launched.
Yeah, the Ian Waite's New Compress.
All linked, but each with an individual image of its own.
Yes, it was a nice job to do that, actually. Quite a challenge. Because I didn't get... Well, at the time I was commissioned to do it, half the stories weren't written.
Yeah.
I got a kind of half-baked idea of what the story was about, because they hadn't written them. And so that was quite challenging. But I hit on the idea of using bees because there was a description of rooftop beehives in this Jan Charnock story. The Neil Williamson one had these drone-like bees, surveillance things, that fly around, little robotic bees.
So it's quite common then for, like art-wise, for cover art to be commissioned for it before the work's even at a stage where you can look at it and go, oh, okay, draw your inspirations.
I don't know, actually. I mean, I did one recently for the States, the Sholan series, I think. Jim's done one of those, and guys like Mike Whalen and Don Mates have done them as well in the past. And that one up there is the painting of it. It has these sort of strange cat-like creatures. It's half human, half cat.
Right.
In it, And the thing that looks a bit like a zebra, the author gave me a little drawing that somebody had done of this particular creature. Said, can we have it like that, And it was just a little black and white sort of scribble, the thing on theirs. But when I sent the rough off, the author came back and said, well, actually, the cat-like creature, its fur is supposed to be black, unlike those Egyptian ringlets, that the pharaohs used to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how they work that out?
Yeah.
It's got to be like that. So I guess it's part of their universe, part of their story. So hence it got changed.
When you see a light hitting surfaces in your paintings, it's like you can see the glint and the gleam of it, like you would for a photograph, a higher resolution photograph. And I mean, you seem to like things quite clean in your images in terms of it. Like I said, it's almost picture perfect in the way that you do your illustrations.
Right. I mean, I tend to try and make them as sharp as possible. I use some stuff called frisk film, or frisket, they call it, and it's a low-tack adhesive film that you use as a masking device, to give you areas that are exposed so you can apply the colour. And I mean, you can apply the colour whichever way you like. The one you've got behind you, all those rocks were all done individually using the stipple effect, so you don't need to use an airbrush. You can use whatever comes to hand. But the actual the business end of it is this frisket. And a lot of people use that. Everybody, all artists use it now. And you can do the same sort of thing in using Photoshop. It's basically a masking process, that's all.
Well, thanks for talking to us, Chris, and for giving us an insight about your process and book illustration in general. And enjoy the rest of Eastercon.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Rob. Nice to meet you.